Hi everyone, it's day 5 of, I'm going to use secondhand after today, day 5 of Pop-Up COP. Welcome, I'm Nicola Steen and I'm here with...
Adrian Rimmer, back again after a 2-day break.
And
to Aldous. First time on this black.
Thank you very much. So Edwin's in Bel Air. He's someone I've known an awful long time. We actually were just reminiscing that we went on this tour around Africa. I mean, it was almost around Africa. We went to 4 countries a week back in about 05, maybe 06. That's sort of, so 20 years ago.
I think it was 06, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. And as I said, Edwin is a fount of knowledge. And so if Edwin says 06, 06 it is. So, Adrian, you were just going to run over, I think, why we're doing Pop-Up COP.
Yeah, just to recap for those who haven't seen only the previous 4 days of sessions, really the purpose of Pop-Up COP is to try and bring a sense of what's taking place in Berlin this year and the COP process more broadly to a wider audience. Either those who would typically go and aren't going this year because it's a slightly smaller COP in terms of attendance, or for those who are unable and just very interested in understanding more about it. And we'll get into some of the sort of sense of where the negotiations got to as we discuss with Edwin. So with that, I mean, maybe we'll introduce Edwin. It's Tom is arriving. This is excellent.
Tom. So this is great. So I'm just to paint the picture here. If people are looking on LinkedIn, there's been quite a lot of activity down at what we call the Blue Zone, which is the in part of COP. Thank you, Tom, for whatever you did to get here. There's been military, there's been protesters, there's been entrances shut and entrances opened. Anyway, Tom was with us on Monday, and we thought it might be nice for him to give a little update of what he's been doing this week, to give you a flavour of the sort of things that some he would have planned and some he would have no idea were going to happen. So no pressure on Tom, he's just going to have a little chat afterwards. Edwin is going to really bring his expertise now and his thoughts on COP, his company DNB, and just paint a picture of why he's there and what he's looking for at COP. Thank you.
So Edwin, if you give us a sense, just for those who aren't familiar with DNB, just very briefly, what it does, and particularly in relation to climate, and therefore why you're present and have been for many years.
Okay, well, DNV is in the climate change world, like what we call a validation verification body, responsible for validating and verifying climate change projects in the old clean development mechanism, but also now moving forward in the voluntary market. But we're also known for our work as a maritime class body, whereby we class vessels that go on sea in terms of their seaworthiness, but also in terms of cargo assessment. But then coming back again to climate change, we're also one of the key assurance companies around climate finance and green bonds and taxonomy as such. And then particularly around this time of the year, we are also known for our energy transition outlook that we yearly send out as part of our research units that DNV has alongside its maritime energy and supply chain services.
Just to pop in case there's people listening who are not so familiar with the process, when there are initiatives where finance gets invested to create an activity that wouldn't have happened otherwise, we get the project validated by a third party, and they have to go through a rigorous process to have that role. And then each year, the emission reductions, the activity gets verified, and the emission reductions can then go through a process of getting issued. So those are the words that Edwin used: validation and verification. Thank you.
And I think that's really key, because ultimately, trust in the data that comes out of climate finance is vital, both in terms of measuring the impact of it, but also in terms of increasing investor confidence, whether that's countries deploying public money or whether that's investors deploying private capital. So maybe, Edwin, it'd be great to get a sense of the ways in which you think about that in terms of how who are the users of your services in that regard? What are the challenges of getting accurate and trustworthy data, etc.?
Okay, first of all, I think maybe for the audience to know that obviously as a validate, verify or an insurance company, we live by rules. I always tell people I have the simplest job in the world. I only have to say yes or no. It complies, it does not comply. And therefore, obviously, following what happens at a COP like COP30 is important for us to understand not only the actual rules, but also the intent of the rules and the nuances behind what the different parties try to achieve with the rules that they put in place. Coming back to your question about who uses our services. Obviously, on the one hand, these are project developers that wish to attract financing or wish to get registered under one of the UN mechanisms to create units that they can transfer later on or sell. But also we have a large portfolio with financial institutions that look at us to assess investment bonds at their validity and their performance in terms of not so much the financial side, but more on the technical side in the ability to achieve the work and over the time that obviously they want to do. Particularly here, I think it's notable that we're very active in what's known as the novel technologies like carbon capture storage, bioenergy and carbon capture storage. So in that respect, DNVs always tend to be a bit on the front line of looking at new technologies, but also explore the opportunities of what rules can actually achieve in terms of innovation, but at the same time providing confidence to the market that what they buy into is actually able to deliver.
And that's really key. If I bring it to the way that sort of markets work, so for example, our London Stock Exchange's sustainable bond market, we rely on organisations like DNV to have created and approved, approved the sort of third-party frameworks under which green and sustainable bonds are issued, and then to provide the assurance on an annual basis that the proceeds of those bonds has been deployed appropriately. So I think it's a really key part of the process that is constantly looked at in terms of oversight by the exchange, but also then used as data by investors. And you meant
just a quick comment on that. At the moment, traditionally we've sort of like always worked on an annual basis, but we do increasingly start seeing that we also do that on a shorter period because as technology become available. So, for example, for the European Emission Trading Scheme and the IMO for shipping, we currently monitoring on a daily basis 15,000 vessels around the world that upload the material that whenever they need to issue reports to the regulators, they can actually provide that. And we see that also now with other sectors like direct air capture, where obviously large investments are being made and quick ability to service and sell credits is paramount. And therefore we start looking at more regular assessments and regular issuance that allows people to not have to wait 12 months or even longer.
It's a really good point because there's a lot of technology around digital MRV.
Sorry, we've got 1 minute. So if Edwin, sorry, I interrupted, I was on mute, sorry. Edwin, is it okay if we just move Edwin on to what he's doing at COP and what he hopes for COP?
Absolutely. I think it's great to get a sense of where you see the negotiations at so far, where there are any challenges that you're aware of and observing.
Obviously, for those who's not familiar with the process in COP, Friday first week, which is today, is always where we start seeing new text appearing, where we've heard sort of like had the first few days where everybody says what they want, and then the co-facilitators try to present a consensus document around that. So this morning we see the first documents of that, and that will sort of like now over time be refined, and some of the good things will stay, some of the good things will disappear, some of the bad things will hopefully disappear, and some of that will stay. I think that at this stage, the main concern that we have from the business side is whether the presidency would stick to the procedural processes of this COP, meaning that this COP is an operational COP, particularly in the emission trading side, and therefore we should not have a renegotiation or opening of the renegotiation of things that were agreed last year, because that was defined as being in 2028. So I think that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing, because there are certainly parties that want to open up the negotiation again.
Thank you, Edwin. That's great. I'm going to bring in Tom, if you don't mind, because we're trying to definitely keep this to 15, but brilliant. And we'll cover that, folks, hopefully a bit more with Alessandro tomorrow. Tom, how's your week been?
It's been very good, thank you. I think really slightly disjointed, but I think it's moved into a very smooth running process at this point. There's been a lot of focus this week on Indigenous communities. We're in the middle of the Amazon, so it makes sense. I think we're really pleased to see the Indigenous land tenure commitment, and therefore there's been a lot of talk on that. We've been running our own events, bringing in Indigenous community members from the dry lands of Africa as well to talk about the importance of land tenure. And the reality is that if that land tenure system works effectively, it actually brings in investment. So today's Carbon Markets Day. We'll be running some events on community-centered, Indigenous-led carbon programs through nature. And so I think just trying to reinforce the fact that actually Indigenous communities, if empowered, can deliver quite effective nature-based solutions. Of course, we're relying on 6.4, and where does that get us to? Currently, there's some positive signs from the negotiators that 6.4 won't be including nature as a solution. But we'll keep our fingers crossed. Things can change any minute.
Tom, will the events that you have, are you going to have stuff on your website? Will people be able to find that afterwards?
LinkedIn. Go with LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. There you go, folks. Yeah. LinkedIn. You heard it here. Thank you. What else are you doing your last day?
There's a lot of work still focusing on the Riyadh Action Agenda. So really, this is the Action COP. And so taking forward what happened in Riyadh last year at the UN CTD COP and looking at how do we align the land restoration activities of what came out as agreements in the UN CTD COP and align those with the UNFCCC agenda. So a lot of work focused on that.
We were both there. We were some of the very few Europeans, weren't we? And we bumped into each other there. Yep. Thank you. Edwin, what are you looking forward to in the next couple of days?
I think a little bit similar to Tom. Obviously, we're very looking at how the Article 6 trading aspects will go around. It's probably also interesting to see that we now, on the non-trading side in Article 6.8, we see some movement, even though that looks very much like a new mechanism for trading. So that's an area. We're also obviously looking at financing in terms of how financing is regulated. It still goes around very much the old north-south expectations. So that's still worrying that we seem to fall back into the old ODA type of thinking, and thereby missing the private sector finance abilities that could be deployed. So I think that's an area that we are really looking at from BNV to see how that works out.
Thank you. So I've listed on LinkedIn we've got information about the speakers. Reach out to them if any of this grabs your attention, you want to speak to them more, you'd like to do business with them, you'd like to work on projects with them, you'd like to have a discussion with them. I'd like to thank EBRD for sponsoring us and encouraging. We've had some wonderful speakers, and we hope it will continue for the rest of the week. We wish you well, Tom, wish you well, Edwin. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us. Thank you,
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.